Welcome back to Draft Mayhem. Today we're going to be talking about the 2025 draft needs for the Chicago Bears. Let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the wide receiver group. DJ Moore seemed to have taken a step back this season. I'm going to attribute that to the poor offensive line play and indecision making by Caleb Williams because of that poor offensive line play. I think next year he's going to jump right back into where he was, which is one of the best receivers in the league. Rome Odunze, this guy showed flashes all season. I have all the confidence in the world that he's going to continue to grow every season. He can go up and get those 50-50 balls. He can catch balls on the side, going into the sideline. His route running seemed to get better and better. He seemed to be on the same page with Caleb when a play would break down. Caleb could find him open or throw it up to him. This guy's just got all the potential in the world, and I think he's going to get better and better, especially as Caleb improves as well. Keenan Allen, we're not sure what's going to happen with him next year. He had a couple disappointing drops, but he did seem to be Caleb's favorite target. I don't know. He has a lot of trust in Keenan. He still came down with a lot of balls. Yeah, Keenan still ended up with over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns on the season. So, if we can get him back on another 1 or 2 year deal, I know he said the only places he's willing to play at is Chicago or somewhere in California. So we'll see how that plays out. Besides those three, we really did not have any production from any of the other wide receivers. If you remember DeAndre Carter, who's kind of a veteran, had some plays early in the season, and he was helping catch kicks and punts when it was clear that Velus Jones was not the answer, which I think all the fans knew, but it took Ryan Poles a while to figure out. Tyler Scott still developing. I know he plays special teams. I don't have much faith that he's going to develop any further. So wide receiver is definitely one of the higher needs heading into the draft. We did just spend a high pick on Rome Odunze last year, so it's not something we need to reach for in this draft. I think if you can get a guy in one of the later rounds who maybe has some explosive abilities to open up the field a little bit, give us that kind of Jameson Williams that Ben Johnson had on the Lions, that would be sort of the ideal fit here. All right, let's move on to tight end here. Cole Kmet, had ups and downs this season. It seemed like Shane Waldron and the other play callers just did not know how to use him. He had that monster game in London, but besides that, he just was not consistent enough. And again, I think that was more of the offensive scheme and play calling than it was Cole. I think he's going to be a top 10 tight end in the league next year, and we'll see how that ages. Behind him, Gerald Everett, the signing last season just did not pan out very well. Again, we just did not utilize him. Probably didn't utilize him correctly, as he's more of a receiving tight end and not much of a blocker. Mercedes Lewis got another year older. I don't really see us bringing him back next year. So tight end is another need. It's not something you need to address early in the draft, but maybe a developmental tight end in the later rounds. Let's talk running backs now. DeAndre Swift will be the one heading into next year, unless Ben Johnson decides to get rid of him again like he did on the Lions, but they paid Swift a decent contract last offseason. I think they're going to roll with him for another year. That guy had a really up and down season. Started off terrible, and then, everyone was talking shit about him on media. The fans were, and he stepped it up for a couple games and then kind of dipped back down. So hopefully next year he can be a little more consistent, hit those holes a little more aggressively, and be a better player overall. Roschon Johnson behind him is a fun player to watch. Really powerful runner, likes smashing into people. Definitely has some injury concerns. Seems to never be able to stay consistently on the field, always getting nicked up. Hopefully next year he can stay healthy for an entire season. He's going into year 3 and hopefully keeps on improving. He's been a fun player to watch develop and bring energy to the team. Not much behind Roshan, so running back's a position of need. I do not want them to address it in the first 2 rounds. I think there's too many other glaring holes. I don't want them spending that top 10 pick on Ashton Jeanty like some experts are predicting. Someone in rounds 3 through 6 would be perfect. This is deep running back class. Maybe they can get someone with, a little more speed, a little more juice to add to this backfield. Speaking of glaring holes, let's talk about this offensive line. Obviously, the interior of this offensive line is where we need a ton of help. Definitely our biggest need going into the season. Tevin Jenkins just cannot stay healthy. I feel like 2024 was his healthiest season. It still felt like he was getting nicked up all the time. So hopefully maybe they could bring him back on a 1-year deal or something. But I do not want them paying this man big bucks. Shelton they brought in last offseason, and he was a real disappointment. I don't know what Poles saw in him as a starter. That's what he paid him like. I just do not see it. That was a big miss by him. Obviously, Nate Davis, we cut him. That was another huge miss by Poles. Some obvious errors in his case. Pryor had to step in, and I think Pryor is a good backup, but that's what he is. Darnell Wright, I think, is going to become one of the best right tackles in the league. He's going into his 3rd year, and I'm really excited to see how he plays in 2025. Braxton Jones, our left tackle, he is, as everyone puts it, serviceable. He's not elite by any means. He's actually kind of small. He can get overpowered, but he is solid enough, and, left tackle is in a position I think we need to address at that number 10 pick. I think we need to stick with an interior guy there. Quarterback isn't really something I need to talk about here, but Caleb Williams, obviously, a really up and down season. The huge positive takeaway I took from that season was this guy is clutch as hell. This guy led so many almost comebacks, that came down to Flus losing the game for us or special teams letting us down. But Caleb's a really clutch player, and he can make big-time plays. And with a better offensive line and better play calling, I'm excited to see what that kid can do next year. Jumping to the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about what I think is the second biggest need on this team besides interior offensive line, and that's the defensive end position, specifically the number 2 behind Montez Sweat. Montez had a pretty disappointing season, but he was clearly banged up. He was playing injured. He was also getting double teamed all the time. I have confidence that he's going to bounce back next year, but to bounce back, he needs a number 2. He needs someone else who can, when he's getting double teamed, to get after the QB so it can open him up, because no one else on this defensive line is scary enough yet to frighten the other teams. So they put all their focus on Montez, and it's really just a glaring hole in this team. DeMarcus Walker is really good against the run. He is just not much of a pass rusher. They traded for Darrell Taylor last year, who had a couple good games. I think he ended up with like 3 sacks on the season, though, so nothing really special. Austin Booker, who they took in the 5th round in 2024, he's a developmental guy. He really didn't do a lot. He played with a lot of energy, but he needs to get stronger, and he just needs another couple years in the league to develop that strength and to really be able to make an impact on this team. But, hopefully he can be a really good rotational guy in the next year or 2. So defensive end is definitely a need in the draft, and I think they should address it with any of those top 3 picks that they have in the 1st and 2nd round. Let's look at defensive tackle. Dexter, he's going to be going into his third year here. I think he's coming along really well. I would like to see a big step this year and for him to become one of the better defensive tackles in the league. He's got all the tools. He's still trying to put it together on a more consistent basis. And I think with a little more help from the defensive end position, he's going to get even better because of that. And I'm excited to see what he's like going forward. Billings got hurt this year. I think he was one of our best defensive players before that injury. He could take on double teams. He was doing all the dirty work and he was doing it really well. They signed him to a good contract. Besides those two guys, you probably could use some more depth behind them, but it's not one of the higher needs. So, again, wouldn't use our first or second round pick on it, but definitely one of the later picks, draft another guy. There's a lot of good defensive tackles in this draft. Cornerback position, I don't see it as a need there at all. Jalen Johnson is playing like one of the best cornerbacks in the league this year. That contract looks like it was totally worth it. Kyler Gordon really stepped up this year. He's so good in the slot as that nickel corner. I'm really excited if he can stay healthy. I think he's going to become one of the best cornerbacks in the league as well. Tyreek Stevenson just seemed to go downhill after that Washington game. That was really disappointing, but we've got that Minnesota cornerback Terrell Smith behind him who played really well this year. Hopefully Stevenson can bounce back a little bit, and that position group is really strong on this team. The linebacker group had a kind of disappointing season this year, I think. TJ Edwards still played as the better linebacker, I think. Tremaine just seemed to really get kind of lost on the field sometimes. He gets caught up in blocks and misses tackles. It's hopefully he can bounce back a little better next year. Jack Sanborn, hopefully we can re-sign him because he is probably one of the best backups in the league. I could see a team trying to sign him as a starter. So later round linebacker might be another need. We can have him play special teams and whatnot. Safety group. Kevin Byard ended up being a really good signing by Poles, which is great because Poles has missed on a few signings, as you heard earlier in this video. But yeah, Kevin was a great veteran on this team, and I'm glad we have him again next year. Brisker was on his way to having a really good year, and then that concussion knocked him out for over half the year. That's definitely concerning. If he gets another one, he's out indefinitely. It honestly might retire him. So safety is definitely a possible need in the draft. Hopefully again with a third round pick or later, but it's definitely a position they could use some depth at. To summarize, the biggest need on our team is interior offensive line. First and foremost, guard and center. Behind that is defensive end. We need someone opposite of Montez Sweat. Other than that, we have some holes, but no real glaring issues. Could use a running back, could use another receiver, a backup tight end, some safety depth, and a defensive tackle. Those are all possible draft options, but certainly doesn't have to be in rounds 1 or 2. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one.